In this video, we're going to be discussing all things solar. How much power and batteries do we need to never worry about it? It's a beautiful sunny day here, and I feel like something's missing. Perfect! Let's get started.
We're Hayley and Jake. After spending 8 months driving around North America in our van Vincent, we've decided to start a ground-up van conversion.
In the middle of COVID-19. Last week, we went to Whistler and had a blast. This week, we're getting back to the van build. Hey guys, it's Hayley and Jake, and welcome to week 6 of our van build. Last week we went to Whistler to celebrate Hayley's birthday. She's back at work this week, and we had a blast. It was a ton of fun, and we just had a blast hiking the mountain. This week we're going to be discussing solar. Some people might be intimidated by the thought of their solar. There's so many components you might need, and how do you really know what you want? Well, there's tons of great videos on that. I've linked a couple of them in the description below. They're awesome. They help you figure out exactly what wires to use, where to buy your parts, what brands might be good. This video is just going to be take a step back from that and say, how much solar do you need? Well, to start with, you need to have a bit of an understanding of solar. Solar panels, as most of you know, generate power when the sun is out. So in order to make sure you have the power you need, any solar system needs batteries. The batteries are what store your power, and they will allow you to use it at night or when it's cloudy. So for that, you need batteries. And batteries can be charged by two ways: your solar panels on the roof or the alternator in your vehicle. The alternator will give you power while you're driving, while the solar will give you power whenever it's sunny. For the purposes of this, we're actually ignoring our alternator and we're keeping it as a bit of a backup so that we know that our solar is robust and that whenever we need, we can just turn the car on, we'll have more power from the alternator. Why do you want solar in your van? Well, the reason most people want solar is so that they can be as green as possible, but also so that they can travel in their van as comfortably and as homey as possible. In that case, you need to be able to run things like lights, a water pump, a fridge. You want to make this a comfortable experience. You don't just want to throw a mattress in the back of your van and take off to Timbuktu. You're going to need power. Your typical house runs off 120 volt AC power, while a lot of your other electronics might run off 12 volt DC power. The batteries you'll have in your van are 12 volt power. To get that into 120 volt, you're going to have an inverter. You can buy those all over the place. There's a bunch of different kinds. Maybe I'll link one in the description below just so that you guys can get a bit of information about it, but that's not what this is about. You need to know that for 12 volt power, you have your batteries. For 120 volt power, you have the inverter. The inverter takes power from your batteries and gives you 120 volt out. That's all you need to know. If you want to plug a blender in, it has to be plugged in through your inverter. If you want to run any RV components, that can go to your battery. So you have a 12 volt battery system, a 120 volt system that runs off of your batteries, and you have a solar panel setup charging your batteries. Again, this is not how to set up your system, this is how to figure out your requirements. The things you need to know is you have a 12 volt system, which is DC, direct current. You have a 120 volt system, which is any of your household electronics. That's kind of the basics you need to know moving forward. I don't want to get into this too much. There's a lot of great videos online, but the very basics you need to know is that power, which is watts, is your voltage times your current. Okay, if you have a 1200 watt blender, say you want a blender, and you're running it at 120 volts, it will take 10 amps to run. 120 volts times 10 amps is 1200 watts. So that's how electrical equipment is rated. If you look at the back of your phone charger or blender, it'll usually say 1200 watts or whatever the power is. It might also say 12 volts, 10 amps. That's fine. You can just multiply those together and you'll get the power for any given equipment. If you guys have any questions, please comment below. I'm doing my best, but this is a bit of a dense subject, and I would love to help you guys do this the best you can. There's been a lot of great feedback and great support in this community, and we're making these videos to try to share our journey and give back as much as possible. If you guys want to know anything else, if you'd like more details about this, if you need help, ask us, please. We're doing our best, but if you need something specific, please comment below. So what we want to know at any given moment is how many amps per hour we're using. Batteries are typically rated in amp hours. So if you have a 100 amp hour battery, it means you can draw 100 amps for 1 hour. It can also draw 50 amps for 2 hours. Your amps times your time is going to be your capacity of the battery. Different batteries have different amounts you can take out of them. A 100 amp hour lead acid battery can give you about 50 amp hours before it damages. You can only get about 50% of your capacity from a lead acid battery. Lithium iron phosphate batteries give you about 80%. So if you have a 100 amp hour battery, you can use about 80 amp hours before the cell gets damaged. So you need to keep in mind that you can't necessarily use all of your battery. You need to keep that in mind with your capacity. So you say, Jake, I want to calculate my power requirements. Where do I start? Well, here, I understand how to get my amps. I understand a bit about power. I understand a bit about the batteries. I know I need batteries. How do I start? What you need to do is find the components you want to run in your van that run off electricity. We're going to have a fridge, a fan, a water pump, our laptops, possibly a microwave, maybe a couple small things, maybe a blender, maybe a toaster. So the first thing you need to do is find out what you want in your van, what you want to power. From there, you need to go through and record what the manufacturer says the power requirements are and at what voltage. It's either going to be at 12 volts or at 110 to 120 volts, something in that range. And you need to go through and make a list of your parts. So for us, on this spreadsheet, I went through and said our fridge is 50 watts at 12 volts. And I just write this down for now, we'll use it later. My heater or my fan is 12 volts and it's going to take half amp on low and about 2.8 amps on high. So I'm just writing this down for now. My water pump is 12 volts, it takes about 6 amps. We want to have a UV filter that takes about 2 amps at 12 volts. And then a microwave and a toaster, well, all of this stuff is 120 volts, household voltage. You plug it into a normal house. So all of that means it's 120 volts. And they didn't tell me the amps, but they told me that it's 1,000 watts. Okay, so I'm going to write down 1,000 watts at 120 volts. And we'll go over how to use this later. So you need to figure out what you want to run, and then just keep in the back of your mind when you want to run them. And then from there, we need to figure out how much power we're going to actually be using in amp hours, which is current times time. So for Hayley and I, what we wanted to do was figure out how long we could be off grid without running our alternator, without turning our vehicle on, and still have power. How much power and batteries do we need to never worry about it without buying more than we need? It's a beautiful sunny day here, and I feel like something's missing. Perfect. Let's get started. Hopefully that makes Hayley laugh when she sees this. Okay, so we have a bit of a background in what you need, your solar, and how everything's going to work. You've gone through and you found your power requirements for each aspect that you want. Your fridge, your fan, your water pump, you know the wattage and the voltage or the amps that it takes. From there, we're going to go to our spreadsheet. So what we do first is on the left, column A, we have hours. 1 to 24, that's just for every hour of the day. And this is so that we can just get a ballpark for what solar we're getting throughout the day and what uses we're getting throughout the day. One of the main differences, actually the main difference between what I built and what I've seen everyone else do, is they don't really take into account that you're not using everything at the same time. They just say, over the day I'm using this, how much power do I need for the whole day? But in reality, you're getting solar at certain times. You're only using your pump at certain times. You're not using a toaster all day. That way can lead to a little bit bigger than you need. It's safe, but this is the way we're doing it. So in column 1, we have the hours. Column 2, you have solar yield throughout the day. And this is numbers I've looked up online and taken from seminars. And it just is a ballpark. I know it'll change depending on the summer, winter, latitude, might be longitude. One of them. It'll change depending on where you are in the world. And obviously it'll be different in the shade, but this is the ballpark that we're using. So to start, what we're going to do is for the 100, 200, 300, and 400, we're just going to go and times them by the percent yield to find out what power we're expecting to get throughout the day. Okay, now we know what amount of solar we're getting throughout the day. Now, let's turn that into amps. So because we want our battery to be at 12 volts, we want to know how much current we're going to get at 12 volts out of each of these power. So all you do is you take each cell, each power, and divide by 12. So let's do that. Okay, now we know how much current we're expecting to get, how much energy we're expecting to get from the sun at any given hour for 100, 200, 300, and 400 watt solar panels. So that's our energy in. Now we want to know our energy out. So I looked up on the manufacturer website the power for my fridge. It's 50 watts at 12 volts. So I want to know the current that's going to give me. I just divide 50 by 12. So I'm going to go along and do that. And I'm going to make sure it's negative because it's power coming out of the battery. Equals minus 50 divided by 12. Okay, so at any given hour, at any given moment, my fridge needs 4 amps to run. Over an hour, it's going to take 4 amp hours. And I'm going to run my fridge for 24 hours a day. So because of that, I'm going to drag the column with the 4.2 for every hour of the day. And that's energy out, so it's negative. Next, we're going to do our fan. Now, this is a 10-speed fan, and I looked up on the manufacturer website that it takes half of an amp at low and 2.8 amps on high. So what I'm going to ballpark is that I'm going to sleep with it on low from probably about 10 until, let's just say 7. And so it's going to be minus 0.5 of an amp. And I know that because I looked it up. Minus 0.5. And that's going to go till, we'll call it 6 a.m. I'll call it 7. And then from 7 a.m. onwards, I'm going to run the fan on high. This is probably not realistic, but it'll give me kind of a worst case scenario of what I can do. So I looked that up as well, and that is minus 2.8 amps. From there, the next thing I want to run is a water pump and a water filter. I looked it up as well. It said on the manufacturer website that the water pump uses 6 amps. I'm going to ballpark that I'm going to use the water pump for 5 minutes in the morning to make water, coffee, and dishes. And then we want to build a shower into our van, so we're going to ballpark 20 minutes with a water pump at night. So to do that, we're going to take the amount of time divided by 60, so 5 divided by 60 times the current, and that's going to give us the amount of amp hours we're going to use in that hour. So I'm going to say at 8 a.m., I'm going to use 5 over 60, so 5 minutes, times minus 6 amps. So that in total is going to give me half of an amp. And at 8 o'clock at night, I'm going to go minus 6 amps times 20 minutes divided by 60, because I'm assuming I'm going to take a 20-minute shower. Every other time, my water pump is 0. And I'm going to assume my water pump only my water filter only runs when my water pump is on. It might be an oversimplification, but just for the sake of argument, that's what we're going to do here. And I can see that my UV filter uses 2 amps at 12 volts. Okay, we have done all of our 12 volt components. In this, we have a fridge, a fan, a water pump, and a UV filter. Now we're going to move on to our 120 volt components. Anything run off the 120 volt system has to go through your inverter. Your inverter takes your 12 volt power and puts it into 120 volt power so that your household appliances can use it. This is going to be anything that would normally plug into a house. This is going to be your appliances, a blender, a coffee maker, your laptop, your phone charger, anything that plugs into household power. So what we're going to do here is we have to convert it into 12 volt power. So it's a very similar process to what you did with your 12 volt system, but there's a one step further you have to go. To get the current at 12 volts, we're going to divide the power, which is 1000 watts in this case for the microwave, by 12 volts. And that'll give us our 12 volt current. It's going to be 10 times higher than you would at 120 volts. So you go 10 divided by 60 to show 10 minutes. What we're going to do is we're going to go 1,000 watts divided by 12 volts is going to give us a current. It's going to take 83 amps. It's a lot. And then we're going to times that by 5 divided by 60, which means we're running the microwave for 5 minutes. And that turns that 80 amp hours into 80 amps into 7 amp hours. Running the microwave for 5 minutes will cost you 7 amp hours of energy. And now we're going to say we're going to run it for 10 minutes at night. One other thing to consider is if you go through your inverter, you're going to have some power loss. I looked it up for my inverter, and it's 88% efficient, which means every time I use 120 volt power, I'm losing 12% of my power. And I'm going to accommodate that by dividing by 0.88. So it turns out, after inefficiencies, it's actually going to cost me about 8 amps to run that. And now I'm just going to copy that down to 8 o'clock at night. And I'm going to go for 10 minutes. Every other time of the day, I'm not using the microwave. And I'm also going to do the same thing for my toaster. Toaster is going to be very similar. It's 1200 watts instead of 1000 watts, but it's the same process. You divide the 1200 watts by 12 volts, and it's going to give you 100 amps. That's a lot. So you're only going to be running this for a short amount of time, and you have to make sure your cables are big enough for this. Again, we're not talking about that in this video, but just know it's not always the easiest to run this much current. So we're going to run this at, let's say we're going to do it at the same time. It's going to be on for 5 minutes. And it's going to be the same thing, same time as the microwave. And we're not going to run the toaster in the evening. No, we're not going to run it in the evening. It's microwave or toaster, folks. Don't do both. Okay, let's turn this on. I also have an espresso maker and a blender in here. I'm going to leave out the espresso maker. It was just in there for fun. But the blender, I will put in. So let's go and do that. And that, again, is 1000 watts. And that's going to be the same as the microwave. We're going to run the blender at lunch. So at noon, it's going to run for 2 minutes. Okay, next, Hayley and I want to charge our laptops. These also are going to run off 120 volts because they're built to plug into a house. So that means we're going to be charging them at night, and each of them are going to charge for 2 hours. So we're going to say, and that'll be full. That's our estimate here. So they take 87 watts at 120 volts. So what we're going to do again is we're going to divide 87 by 12, and that'll give us the current that's coming out of the batteries. Let's say we're going to have them both plugged in at the same time, starting at 10 o'clock. So we're going to do equals 87 divided by 12. Oh, and remember, all these have to be negative. So I need to add a minus sign in front of all of these ones, because all power out of the battery has to be negative. And we're going to charge our phones at night. They're 12 watts at 120 volts. That means it'll take an amp each. And I'm just going to say these are going to charge the full over 6 hours. Okay, so we have the solar in that we're getting. We have the 12 volt and the 120 volt power out. Now we just add them. What we want to do is we want to sum the right column for the energy. So for the solar, make sure you pick the 100. For the 100 watts, make sure you pick the 100. For the 200, 200, 300, 300, 400, 400. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add all of the draws, and then I'm going to go through and do the rest. Okay, now I know the energy out at every hour of the day. It looks like then at times between 10 and 2 are pretty beastly. And now I'm going to add the power coming in from the solar panels. Okay, so now what you can see is that throughout the day, the only time in this specific scenario, and keep in mind this is just something we might do. You really need to think about your scenario and make it work for you. But in this specific scenario, The only time we're going to be positive power is if we have above 400 watts. Any other time, we're slowly going to be losing power. And that's not the end of the world. This is, again, only when you're not driving. Okay, so you now know your power draw and you know your solar in. Where do the batteries come into it? Your batteries can never be more than 100% full, obviously. And you really shouldn't get them more than 20% empty if you're using a lithium battery. So that gives you 80% of the capacity to play with. I have 100 amp hours in my battery. I just drove there. I am full. I got there at 1 in the morning because I'm tired and I went there late. And now, how is my power going to stack up throughout the day? So what we've done here is take my 100 amp hours plus my total energy throughout every hour of the day, and that's how your power is going to vary throughout the day. Now keep in mind that if you're not getting back to 100%, it'll take a couple days to see this out. What I did is calculated it for 3 days. And I've done 100 amp hour, 200 amp hour, and I'm just about to do 300 amp hour. And then I'm going to graph these out and see how long I can stay on each different energy level. So there you have it. With the way we set up these graphs, you have 100 amp hour, 200 amp hour, and 300 amp hour battery capacity. Those are your batteries. And what this means is that we do not want it to go below the blue line at any point. That blue line for lithium ion batteries is 20% of your capacity. If you're using a lead acid, you have to bump that up to 50%. But for lithium ion, this is what it is. We do not want it to go below that blue line at any point because that's where you could start damaging your batteries. So here we can see under the use case that we built, just as this example, with the 100 amp hour, we can stay about 25 hours without turning the vehicle on if we have anything higher than 100 watts of solar. So the most amount of time you can stay is when you hit that blue line. And at 100 watts, at 100 amp hour capacity, it looks like you can stay about 20 hours. And at anything else, it looks like you can stay about 23 hours. But say you want more than that, well, with 200 amp hours of capacity, with 100 watts, you could stay 31 hours. And with 200 watts, you could stay 49 hours. And then it looks like with 300 or 400 watts, you could stay indefinitely. You're getting closer though. And with 300 amp hours, again, with 100 watts, you can stay for about 2 days. 300 watts, you can stay for 3 days. And again, it looks like with 300 or 400 watts, you can stay indefinitely. But remember, you're also going to have your alternator, so keep that in mind as well. How often are you going to not move your vehicle for 3 days? That's it. That's how we calculated our solar. This is what we're going to go with. We haven't built the van out yet, but when we do, and when we've been in it for a while, we'll do a follow-up video to let you guys know how this went. This will be on our website. We're just putting it up there as a tool for you guys if you want. Remember, there's a link to a ton of good resources in the description below. I hope this is helpful for you guys to get an idea. This isn't a very conservative estimate, so use this as kind of the minimum you might want if you don't want to move. But also remember that how often are you not going to be driving? In the entire time Hayley and I went from Vancouver to Key West and back, I think we spent 2 days where we didn't move, like each one day at a time. Every other day we drove. So at the end of the day, the alternator for us was more important than the amount of solar we had. If you guys notice any difference in the audio quality, we got a new microphone. We're super excited about it. It's a Sony mic and it'll be linked in the description below. We've shot all of this on Hayley's Sony a6000 and that'll be linked below as well. We're really excited to be upgrading our microphone. We think could have had better audio in the past and we're happy to be using this. So if you guys notice a difference, let us know. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Next week, we're going to be framing out our floor and maybe the walls so that we can start with the installation. And the week after that, Hayley's coming back and we're going to install our max air fan and our windows. We're a little terrified to drill the holes in the wall, but hopefully you guys will enjoy seeing that soon. If you guys like this video, give it a like, subscribe. We're putting out a video every week. And remember that if you want to see more updates, we're on Instagram at Hayley and Jake. Check out our website at hayleyandjake.com for blogs and updates about what we're doing. and we'll see you guys soon. Last week was Hayley's birthday, and as well as going to Whistler, I wanted to surprise you with a cake. Hi.
How's it going?
Good, happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Happy birthday. The candle keeps burning out. Hang on.
Oh, it's okay. I'll be hands.
There we go.
Oh, thank you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Hayley. Happy birthday to you.
I love it. It has sprinkles. Oh.
Load up. I'm not explaining this very well. Okay. In this video this week, we're going to be discussing. I'm mangling this pretty badly. This is going to be a lot of cutting.